Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Andrew Fraser. We warmly welcome the family of Private Eric Robert Wilson, Private Samuel Charles Wilson, whose story will be told shortly. We also acknowledge Mr. Martin Delabare, President for MELS and IPA Terra de More, who is joining us for the ceremony today, and Mr. Jim Gilchrist, representing the Return and Services League, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast around Australia. Also this evening, wreaths will be laid by visitors as well as students on behalf of the following schools. Wirrapang Public School from Gateshead, New South Wales, MacKillop College, Port Macquarie, and Nambucca Valley Christian School from Nambucca Heads, New South Wales. Shortly, Australia's Federation Guard will dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. It provides a ceremonial presence during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries and for civil and military events, including here at the Australian War Memorial. Historically, a catapult was a support for a coffin, but it has become represented by a remembrance stone or tomb. A catapult party was originally appointed to guard a coffin from theft or desecration. Now it performs a ceremonial role, honouring the dead. Once the Guard members enter the commemorative area this evening, they will replicate the drill of a catapult party placed around the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Samuel Charles Wilson and his brother, Private Eric Robert Wilson. Known as Sam, Samuel Wilson was born in Braidwood, New South Wales in 1885. He was the seventh of 12 children born to George and Isabella Wilson, and was followed by 3 sisters and 2 brothers, Eric in 1895 and James in 1898. The family moved a number of times, and the 2 youngest sons were born in Port Macquarie, where the children went to school. By the time James was born, their mother was 50 years old and their father 55. George Wilson worked in the local sawmill as an engine driver, and several of his sons followed him, including Sam, Eric and James. Sam Wilson enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in July 1915 and was followed by Eric and Jim, who enlisted together 2 days later. The 3 began training together, but Sam and Jim were allotted to the 3rd Battalion and left Australia in November 1915, while Eric sailed the following March with the 1st Battalion. The 3 were reunited in Egypt, where they were all transferred to the 53rd Battalion and ended up in the same platoon of Bravo Company. The 53rd Battalion arrived in France to fight on the Western Front in late June 1916. 3 weeks later, the battalion was committed to its first major operation, an attack on German positions near the village of Fromelles. The 53rd was part of the first attacking wave and suffered heavy casualties in what is now known as the worst 24 hours in Australia's military history. In Australia, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson received the news that one of their sons was wounded. 3 days later, word came that another was missing, and that evening a wire came that the last son had been killed in action. Private Jim Wilson had been wounded, shot through the neck and later rescued from no man's land by British stretcher bearers. He was evacuated to hospital and took some months to recover. He returned to active duty, although his military discipline suffered in the months after Fromelles, and he returned to Australia in 1919. Private Sam Wilson was killed during the Battle of Fromelles. As a bomber, he was last seen keeping a party of Germans at bay before being overwhelmed. His last act was to pull the pins on several Mills bombs and throw them between himself and the attacking Germans. Private Eric Wilson was reported missing after the battle, and his name eventually came through on German casualty lists as having been killed in action. The bodies of both Eric and Sam were recovered by the Germans and buried in a large burial pit at Pheasant Wood. The local newspaper reported that Mr. and Mrs. Wilson bore up wonderfully well under their heavy burden of affliction. Mrs. Wilson proved herself a worthy mother of fighting men. Stifling her emotion with Spartan firmness, she said, with Christian resignation, "When my 3 sons left me, I placed them in God's hands, and His will must be done." Mrs. Wilson died in February 1919 while James was on his way home. In 2009, the burial pits at Pheasant Wood were exhumed in a major archaeological project. The bodies of Sam and Eric Wilson were identified as part of this process, and today the brothers are buried side by side in the newly created Fromelles Pheasant Wood Military Cemetery. Their names are listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. Their photographs are displayed today beside the pool of reflection. Samuel is on my right side of the pool, and Eric is on my left. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Samuel Charles Wilson and Private Eric Robert Wilson, who gave their lives for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.